We're going to start off with the Gemara in Maseches Ksubos and Daf Kuf Gimel. So the Mishnah says the following: Almana she'amra efshi lazuz mi beis ba'ali. So we know that it is one of the conditions of the ksuba, of the marriage document that Chazal were metaken, that they enacted, was that if the husband should die before the wife, then the wife will be sustained from the estate of the husband, and is one of the stipulations of the ksuba. So, if the woman says, "Amra I efshi lazuz mi beis Abba," if the woman says, "I'm not interested in living on the estate. I want to go live somewhere else. I want to go back to my father's house, to my family's house, and I want you to just send me the money in order to sustain me." So Omer Lahem, the surviving children of the husband can say, Im at etzleinu yesh lach mazonos. If you will stay with us, then you will get the sustenance that you are entitled to. V'im ein at etzleinu ein lach mazonos. We're not obligated to sustain you if you're not living on the estate. That's what the Mishnah says. That's in fact the halacha. So says the Gemara, right? Mishum ma. What is the reasoning behind this idea that in order for her to receive this mazonos that is stipulated in the ksuba, she has to be living on the estate of the former husband along with the rest of the family? So says the Gemara, Mishum birkas habayis. It is because of the blessing that is experienced in the home. The Tanu Rabbanan, like the rabbis taught, Lashon Chachamim, all the language of the sages, bracha, osher, umarpeh, is blessing, richness, and healing. Meaning that contained in this halacha is this secret, so to speak, to how bracha is sustained. Now, what is this bracha? This idea called birkas habayis, which literally means the blessing of the house, is what we would call today economies of scale. That's what we would call it. Meaning, in order to produce something at scale ends up being cheaper for each individual unit than it would be if you would just purchase or invest in the unit individually. But we know this. This is observable. But the catch of the economies of scale is that in order to get to a point where you can produce economies of scale requires investment. Right? I think of to give a colloquial example, it's like to compare shopping at a Makolet to shopping at Osherad. So shopping at Osherad, right, the massive supermarket in Talpiot or wherever they have it, right? So there's economy of scale there. But in order to create an Osherad with its, myriad and myriad of aisles and the intricate operation that they have there with the automated tellers and the escalator that moves the carts up and down into the parking lot and all that requires a tremendous amount of initial investment. So on the one hand, there is economies of scale that are achieved at the end. However, there's an investment that's required initially in order to make the foundation, so to speak, that can be at scale. Yeah? This is what the Chachamim call bracha. Bracha, blessing, is that there's this experience of when things come together, right, when there's more scale, right, to use our economic terms, there's more blessing, there's more abundance. Right. Yes. So this is the theme that we're going to be honing in on now. We're up to Os Vav now, and there are actually some very interesting insights that I was not aware of the first time that I read this, and it just something clicked for some reason now to become aware of what exactly the Rav is honing in on. But this is a very powerful theme, and I think that this Gemara kind of underlines, both in a halachic and a pseudo-philosophical context, it underscores the theme that he's going to be speaking out. So says Rav Kook, Hatochen ha-mididi, the content which measures. Now already here Rav Kook is alluding to the fact that the vav itself, in the form of the vav, the actual letter, it kind of looks like a measuring stick. It kind of looks like an instrument that you would measure things with. B'chol ma'uto, with all of its essence, mitpashet hu lamata lematarata shel hitachdut hatochanim. Its purpose or its goal is to unify all the different spectrums of content. Hatsiurim hamugbalim, which is this is a term, by the way, that he's constantly using all the time. Hatsiurim hamugbalim, the different contents that have taken distinct form, which is the euphemism that he has coined to describe the letters. Because each one is a tsiur mugbal. It's a content that's given distinct form. Each one has their own distinct form. So when he uses this term, tsiurim hamugbalim, the forms that have been given specific barriers, specific perimeters, this is the term that he's coined to describe the letters. V'chol ista'afu yotehem, and all of their consequences and branches. B'chibur hazeh, with this connection, again, the connection between the different letters. Shahavav b'horato hashemit, in the actual name of the vav, meaning the letter vav is called vav, v'hagolmit, and its actual picture, again, which is like a straight line, alluding to like a measuring stick. Mora alav holech meshech hachayim umitgaleh, is alluding to the outward motion of life, which is becoming revealed. And how is that? Ha-chalakim ha-mefuzarim, the disparate parts, mefuzar, like means to like be spread out and not connected. The different parts that are spread out and disconnected, shebetzurot gomim, amongst all of the distinct parts, mutsagim umit argenim. They all stand at attention and become ordered. They all stand at attention and become ordered. Now already, what is Rav Kook alluding to? The fact that the vav, in its name, what does the vav mean? The name of the vav means a hook. A hook. A hook means to connect two things together. Right? I've hooked you in. Even like in Yiddish, in English idiom, right? To hook something is to bring things together. Also, in its grammatical use, in the vav in Lashon HaKodesh is a prefix, meaning end. So zeh v'zeh. It's right. It's a conjunction rather. Right. The conjunction end is to hook up phrases or clauses. So that's literally what it's doing. The vav connects things together. So there's a lot of things that are mefuzar. They're all spread about and they're disorganized. The vav comes to mutsagim. They stand at attention and they're organized. Yeah, it's like you can imagine like a chaotic classroom of students, right? This one's throwing the paper airplane, and this one's playing marbles on the floor. This one's hitting his friend in the back of the head. Suddenly, the teacher walks into the room, and everyone stands at attention. They all stay at their desks. So that's the energy that's being brought in. That they all stand at attention and are mitargenim. They become orderly. V'shifat hachayim haklalim ha'amitzim, the general and powerful forces of life, holchot umizdalfot bahem, are poured into them. Hahora hamilulit hadikdukit shel havav, which is the literal meaning and the grammatical meaning of the vav. The literal meaning the name vav, which means hook, and the grammatical meaning of vav, which again is the prefix vav, which means end. So all these connotations are talking about disparate things that now come together. Noseit alea gamken et hatochen shel hachibur v'hayichud. Both of these, again, the grammatical and the literal, they are both containing connotations of chibur, of connection, and ichud, the unification. Hayichushiyut v'hitztarfut hamiviyah et birkat hashalom. This coming together, the hitztarfut, brings with it the blessing of peace. The blessing of peace. B'chol davar shalem, which characterizes all things that are whole. We know that in Lashon HaKodesh, shalom and shalem are the same word, which is very interesting. It's the opposite in English. Peace means peace and pieces. In Hebrew, shalom means peace and whole. Yeah? Right? So shalom, peace, and whole are the same thing. There's something about wholeness, okay, togetherness, that brings peace, which I guess is kind of intuitive, that when things are together, they're by definition peaceful, because if there wasn't any harmony, they wouldn't be together. But it brings about this bracha, birkat shalom. It's worth quoting the Midrash Rabbah in Parshas Naso. Midrash Rabbah in Parshas Naso. Naso is the parsha that we learn about the mitzvah of the Kohanim to bless the people, right? And the blessing ends off with v'yasem lecha shalom. So Chazal said in that Midrash, from here the Chachamim learn that all series of blessings should end off with shalom. which is why the final blessing in the Amidah ends with shalom. They took a cue from Birkas Kohanim, which is a biblically dictated blessing, that it ends off with shalom. We talk about, chen, and we talk about this, we talk about that, we talk about like all these different things, but it ends off with shalom. So too, when you make a series of blessings, you should end off with shalom, right? And as the Mishnah, the final Mishnah in Shas, right, in Maseches Uktzin, which is a Masechta that talks about these handles. What?
Handles and bobs.
Okay, it's right. Nachon. It talks about the technicalities of different types of tumah, of different parts of the fruit, that they're not actually part of the fruit, they're tangential parts to the fruit, like the stem, like Ephraim just said, for example. Anyway, the last Mishnah in the Mishnah, the last Mishnah in Shas says ki ein kli machzik bracha ela shalom. Right. The vessel that contains blessing is shalom. So something about shalom which is equated to blessing, and it's not just that it's equated, but it is the medium by which blessing is achieved. So shalmuso ba mi kibbutz kol chalakav, its wholeness comes from the kibbutz, from the gathering in of all of its different pieces, vihit amtam yachad, and becoming matim, what's a good translation for matim? Becoming appropriate, or not really appropriate, becoming like pieces of a puzzle are matim, right? They fit together. Hamitzaleh al sgulat hazman. This also comes with the ability to transcend the dynamics of time. Uma'arevet et ha'atid im ha'avar, and to mix the past with the future. What is he referring to over here? So this is a unique grammatical device. There's two interesting devices that the vav plays. One, we already said, it's the prefix that connotes end, but there's another grammatical device which the vav does, which is called the vav hahipuch. It's not a device that's used in modern Hebrew, but in biblical Hebrew it's used all the time. All the time it's used. Vav hahipuch is a unique thing that changes the tense of the word from one to another. So if the word is in future tense, it can change the word into past tense. And vice versa. If the word is written down in past tense, it can change the word to future tense. These are all over the place. Vayivarech Elohim es yom hashvi vayikadosh haso. Vayivarech. The word yivarech is in future tense. Yivarech means he will bless. But vayivarech means that he did bless. God blessed already. He already blessed Shabbat and sanctified it. Yeah? We find, right, ve'ohavta es Hashem Elokecha. Ohavta means you did love God. Yesterday you loved God. Right, but ve'ohavta means you will love God. So vav has these very interesting, right, these two functions. The function of, again, the prefix, the conjunction of end, okay, and then the other one is that it switches around the connotation from past tense to future tense, and from future tense to past tense. What is the significance of this? This is a very strange phenomenon just on the face of it. Like, why would you do that? Why do you need to just write it in the tense that you want to write it? Why do you need to write it in the opposite tense and then add the vav in order to flip it back? So he's hopefully going to address that in moving forward. Anyway, that's the end of Rav Kook's. That's the end of the actual language of Rav Kook. So let's jump into a few lines in the commentary over here.
It's significantly shorter.
Significantly shorter? Yeah, it's only like one page and a bit. Yeah, it's one page and a bit. That's true.
What was the relation back to the Gemara? In other words, it's not economical for the wife to be somewhere else because
right. So just to be clear, there's this Gemara is the context is purely halachic. The context was that it's a stipulation in the Ksuba that the estate of the husband, even after his death, will sustain the wife. And the Mishnah says that if the widow now says, I'm not interested in living in the house with the rest of you, I want to leave, I want to go back to my father's house, or I want to go move somewhere else, just transfer me the money, send it to me in a bit, right? So it says, no, if you want to live with us, you can live off the estate, but we're not going to send you cash to do that. Yeah, that's the halacha, right? Exactly, that's not economical, right? Because it's easier, right? It's less of a financial burden. That's the halacha. To which the Gemara comments, it says, what is the meaning of this? It says, because there's this thing called Birkas Habayis. There's this thing called the blessing in the home. And all Lashon Chachamim, all the language of the scholars, brings about certain things. Right, it gives a long list of the inherent qualities that are contained in the speech of a wise person. And one of those qualities is bracha. One of those qualities is blessing. And we see that this is a quality of blessing that's brought about. The halacha contains the potential to contain blessing. And again, what is this? What are the dynamics of this blessing? The fact that everyone is together, it creates this blessing. It creates the ability to hold more than what would be able to be held by each individual. That's literally what the law is based on. So, all these different points that they flow into each other, as we've seen in previous letters. So, just I'm going to read a few excerpts over here. So, when Kook says Meshach HaChaim, right, the drawing out of life, Holech u'mitgaleh becomes more and more revealed. Klamar HaChaim nimshachim mimarom el olamenu. So the first connection of the vav, of the hook, the first connection is from the upper world to the lower worlds, right? Because obviously everything is revealed from the ethereal, purely abstract world of God into the more mundane and material, concrete world of ours. That's the first vav, right? That's the first hook. That's the first connection that's created. V'shifat ha'chaim ha'klalim ha'amitzim holech u'mizdalevet b'hem. Klamar shefa eloki yored. That's what Rav Kook is referring to when he says that the life forces are poured in to the recipient. So again, the first movement, the first vav, the first connection is the world of godliness, the spiritual world, which pours itself into the material world. Okay, but more fundamentally, it's not just going. It's not just the movement of up and down. Meaning, it's true that the vav has this linear look, right? You think, okay, the vav is connecting from higher to lower, but it's not connecting from higher to lower. It's just connecting. It's just connecting disparate things. It could be upper and lower. It could be horizontal. Yeah, meaning it could be connecting two things like one person to another person. So he right, time also, exactly. So that's how this fits into the last comment of time. So we'll get to that in a minute. He quotes here an idea from the Arizal that in the construct of the Arizal's teachings, fundamental dynamics of being are contained within the name of God, Yud Kei Vav Kei. Right, following that pattern of Yud Kei Vav Kei reveals a lot of the nature of reality. I think like a few weeks ago we quoted the Gra. The Gra says that the Yud Kei Vav Kei is literally a geometric model, so to speak, of how the world comes into being, how three dimensions come into being. Right, the Yud is the point; it's like the geometric point, which expands into the first Hey, which is the plane, and then the Vav draws down to the third dimension, and then the third dimension plane is the final Hey. So it's like a model of three dimensions coming into being. So there's a lot there. There's a lot contained in the Torah of the Arizal of the Yud and the Hey, the Vav and the Hey, and how they play out. So the first Yud contains the idea of, and it's a beautiful language how he puts it over here, ha'achdut shemechunas be'imkei atzmo, all the potentiality of the thing which is contained within the depths of itself. Right? In the Kabbalistic jargon, that's called chachma da'atzilus. Chachma is the thing, right? As the Baal Tanya famously says, koach ma, it's the potentiality of the thing that has not been hashed out at all. It's just pure potential. You barely even experience it. All you experience is like a flash. It's kind of like the mashal of the Rambam that he gives in the introduction to the Guide of the Perplexed. He says it's like a person walking along in the dead of night, and there's no moon, no nothing, he can't see, and there's a flash of thunder, and he sees for just a moment, he can see the whole landscape illuminated. It's like that. Chachma it's just a flash of illumination that you barely have any opportunity to internalize the thing. All you know is that there's something there. That's all you know. Now, so the Yud symbolizes pure potentiality which has not been hashed out at all in any way. The next letter, the Hey, misamelet et harochav, it's the movement of widening, the first initial widening. Okay, now that first initial widening is the development of the skill within the person. So let's just take a random example. Let's say a person, right? You can imagine a person who's, he starts off, he's not particularly gifted academically. Right? He's struggling in school. But his teachers identify that he's actually a very smart kid and he has a lot of potential. All that potential is buried deep within him. So that first initial hey of the widening is him developing his own skills in order to be able to learn and process information and contain information. Like, that's just the widening. But it's still contained within him. Meaning it's gone from the state of potential into actualization, but the actualization is only internal. It's only him being able to learn better, to process information better, to retain the information better. The next movement is the Vav. The Vav is now able to externalize and project outward, and other people are also able to experience his capacity for processing and understanding information. Yotzei klapei chutz. So that's the Vav. The Vav is the movement that now things outside of him can experience that thing that he's developing. Yeah. Now the thing that characterizes this projection outwards is this aspect of shalom, of the kibbutz chalakim, of all the disparate elements coming together. So as he says over here, this is in the final paragraph on page 27. People want to follow along. Excuse me, scratch the page 27. I understand that people have different page numbers. Yeah, it's the final paragraph over here. So he says ha'achdut shemitgaleh ba'olam hamufur. Excuse me, I skipped a little bit. I apologize. No, I didn't. I'm sorry. I was correct. Ha'achdut shemitgaleh ba'olam hamufurad. The unification that is revealed in the disparate world of the world of disparate things. Hi makbila la'achdut chelkei hanefesh. This is an idea that Rav Kook speaks about a lot in Arot HaKodesh, of like the spiritual psychology of Rav Kook. He understands that there's many, many forces in the soul. Right? He's kind of riding off the Rambam's theory that he talks about, right? The Rambam Shmona Prakim, the 8 chapters that he wrote as an introduction to Masechet Avot, right? Where he talks about the nature of the soul and the different forces within the soul. So the Rambam emphasizes that there's not multiple souls, meaning people have one soul, and there's different forces that are contained within that soul. So you might ask, well, what's the difference? Who cares if maybe I have multiple souls, and one soul for this attribute and one soul for that attribute? Like, who cares if it's multiple souls or just one soul with different forces? So he says it's a very important difference, because if a person has multiple souls, and that means that those forces within the person are just going to be constantly at war with each other forever, and there's really no working them out. Either you have to forcibly repress one, or just live your life out in a constant state of schism. Right? That's one option. Right? The other option is no. There's only one soul. There's only one soul. There's one nefesh. And within that nefesh, there's many different forces that can be played out. Which means, if there's only one soul, that means that it's possible to attain a harmony and integration and balance within the soul. It's possible to do that. Yeah. So a person experiences that the different forces within their soul are kind of battling it out. Adam mefuzar, he's spread out, like the language that Rav Kook uses over here. Hachalakim hamafuzarim, the different pieces that are spread out. They've been thrown asunder on the floor. Yeah. Hu maleh machloket pnimit. He experiences tremendous internal division. V'netiotav portzot l'chol avar ever lelo seder. And his kochos hanefesh, the forces of his soul, they burst out into all directions. Hurotzed dvarim rabim, he wants many different things. Va'af menugadim, and maybe those things can even be contradictory. Hashrat havav, so the lesson of the vav, misamelet et hakoach hama'ached, it symbolizes the power of unification. Sheshofea mipnimiyut ha'adam, which is births forth from the internality of the person. Umeha etzem, from the essence of the person, hameuchad shelo umechaberet et hachalakim. Meaning, if a person gets in touch with to the extent that a person becomes more and more in touch with their essence, the more they're able to rein in and find harmony with the different forces that are contained within him. Meaning, there's one thing that all of the things can rally around. That's a good word to use for this. All of the different forces of their soul can rally around that one thing. So it's not eliminating or repressing or pushing away any one of the forces, but it's bringing up something that all of the things can rally around. And that's the shalom. That's the shalom, the shalem, the birkat shalom, the blessing of peace. And when all the different disparate forces can find a thing that they can all say, I like that idea. I can rally, I can get on board with that. Yeah. So when they rally around that thing, that is this force that brings internal unity. And when that person that's achieved internal unity, they can also use that tool on the world around them. They can give that hashra'ah, that inspiration for things in the world to rally around something. Right. That's the shalom, birkat shalom. Right. A point that he brings over here, again, paralleling it to the more Kabbalistic jargon. The vav relates to the Kabbalistic construct that we've mentioned here a few times, called the zer anpin, which literally means in Aramaic the small face. The small face is referring to the construct of the first 6 attributes in the Sephardic body, let's say, right, from Chesed down to Yesod. Now, in these constructs, the Zer Anpin is associated with the more masculine qualities. Now, if you think about this is a very, very good description of what this means, the masculine quality. Masculine quality means that it's the force that enters the room, so to speak, and all the different disparate elements that are all running amok, they all stand at attention and they're able to rally around this thing. Again, it's not the forceful tyrant that comes and squashes all of the forces. On the contrary, he walks in, or it walks in, and all of the things they rally. They see that this is the thing that's going to give them direction. This is the thing that's going to make seder ve'irgun, as he says. Irgun. It's going to make order out of the thing. It's going to give the things direction, which is why the vav, it's this very straight line. It's literally a straight line. That's what it is, right? It's honing in all of the different forces to be focused in this pointed way. Yeah, and this is very, very powerful zer anpin masculine energy that again it hones in, it funnels in all of these different forces to be focused in this way. The last point about the transcending of time, right? So again, this works in very powerfully with the idea that kind of undergirds everything about the vav. That the vav it pulls disparate forces together. So as Rav David puts it, ma'aleh et hachalakim me'ever lazman u'me'ira et ha'or ha'atid al ha'oveh, and it illuminates the light of the future onto the present. And there's a very famous line from Rav Nassan of Breslov that he uses in the Likutei Halachos. He says, a person. It's not in the Likutei Halachos. I believe this is in a letter that one of his students wrote him, Rav Nassan of Breslov, right, the disciple of Rav Nachman. So one of his disciples wrote him a letter and asked him. He says, listen, I'm depressed all the time. What should I do? He said, borrow happiness from the future. That's what you should do. You should borrow happiness from the future. And what's the secret of that? He said, the secret is that if a person sees themselves just that their existence exists on an infinitesimal point of the present, then that's the sum total of existence. The present is the sum total of existence. But really, a person lives on a continuum. And there is a connection to the past. And there's also connection to the future. Yeah, the vav, it alludes to this idea, right? It brings about this idea that the present is influenced by the past, and the present can also be influenced by the future. Yeah. So this kind of answers our question: why would you have this weird grammatical device that the word is written in one tense, but it changes the tense to the opposite one? Why don't you just write the tense that you wanted to begin with? So this is the idea. The idea is that the thing is happening now, right? But it's pulling with the hook of the vav. It's pulling from the past onto the present, or it's pulling from the future into the present. Yeah. So the inspiration that a person received from a past event, he's able to pull from that and apply it now. Or the goal that the person sees in the future, right? A week from now, a month from now, a year from now, right? The goal that the person sees, he's able to pull it on to the present. There's a very, very powerful midrash in Rus Rabbah, Midrash Rabbah on Rus, in Parsha Hay, that says that, right, it lists a whole series of events in the Torah that the character who was acting out the event clearly didn't understand the significance of what was going on at that moment. So the first example that it gives is by Ruvain. Ruvain sees his brothers that they're selling the troublemaker Yosef, and they're going to kill him. Excuse me, this is before they decide to sell him. They said, we're going to kill him. We're going to throw him to a pit and kill him. And Reuven says, you know what? I think we should take it one notch down. Instead of killing him, we should sell him, because then we'll make some money off of it also. Yeah? So it says, the narrator, so to speak, of the Torah comments on that. Reuven's intention was to, excuse me, I'm messing up the details of the story again. The brothers say they're going to kill him, and Reuven says, no, let's not kill him, let's throw him into a pit instead. That's the story, right? So the narrator of the story says, what was Reuven's intention? His intention was that later that day he'll come back and rescue Yosef from the pit and take him back to his father. It inserts that, right? So Reuven doesn't know that by the time he gets around to getting back to the pit, Yosef will already be sold and he'll miss his opportunity. So the Torah said, clearly Reuven didn't understand the urgency of that moment. Right? He said I'll go have lunch, I'll have my business meeting, I'll come back later this evening. He didn't realize how urgent it was. That was an example. The other example that it gives is the interaction between Rus and Boaz. That initial interaction between Rus, she's this newcomer from the land of Moab. She's completely destitute. She has to go get charity from the field of this rich individual who lives in Beit Lechem, Boaz, and they have this first initial interaction. And that initial interaction was going to eventually lead to their marriage, which would literally lead to the birth of the Messiah. So that conversation, they clearly did not understand the significance of that initial meeting. Yeah, that's it's a really powerful example. Yeah, to which the Midrash says very powerfully. He says, Kishahayim Nevi'im, in the time of the prophets, Kisha Adam Asa Mitzvah, when a person would perform a good deed, Hayanavi Kosva, a prophet would write it down. A prophet would write down the good deed that they did. Meaning when a person did a significant act that would affect the Jewish people, so there would be a prophet, so the prophet would write it down. That's the prophet's job, to write down the significant events in Jewish history that took place, that past people did, that have a lingering effect onward. Right? The Achshav, and now, She'ein Nevi'im b'Yisrael, there's no prophets. Mi Kosva, Eliyahu Hanavi, Umelech HaMashiach. Eliyahu and Mashiach are writing down the mitzvahs that people do. I quote the pasuk from Malachi, which I think we talked about on Shabbat. And Malachi is the prophet that talks about the fact that Eliyahu is going to be the harbinger of the Mashiach. Yeah. So in this context, I'm forgetting exactly the language of the pasuk. It says, "Oz Yidabru Yirei Hashem Isha Re'eu." The God-fearing ones will speak to each other. Right. V'shama Hashem vayichatev b'sefer, and it will be heard and written down in the book. So it says, who's writing it down? It's Eliyahu and Mashiach. What does that mean that Eliyahu and Mashiach are writing it down? So this is what it means. It's this secret of the vav that's pulling from the past and the vav that's pulling from the future. When the Nevi'im wrote down the mitzvahs that people did, it was meant to be this source of inspiration that we can draw from the past to be able to apply that strength to our present time. That's the prophets writing down the mitzvahs in the past. They're writing down the mitzvahs in the past. All the mitzvahs that are written down, the great deeds of the forefathers and the matriarchs and all these tzaddikim, the Dorei Doros, they're written down so that we can draw inspiration from them. But now there's no more prophets. There's no more prophets. Right? So who's writing it down? Eliyahu and Mashiach. Eliyahu and Mashiach, meaning the future, the climax of Jewish history, that great day. We're supposed to see that shining light and be able to draw inspiration from the future. Drawing inspiration from the future. So again, these are the two modalities of the vav. The vav that's able to transcend time, to be able to bring from the past and borrow from the future, as Rav Nassan says.
That's true. When Yaakov met Rachel, then you could say that he understood the power of that moment. He already knew who she was. He already knew that they wouldn't be married together. All that came into play at that moment. But is it fair to judge Reuven that he should have known the significance? Okay, maybe he should have taken that seriously. But say Ruth and Boaz, were they prophets? They should have known their prophecy was dull. How would they know?
Right. So not to misunderstand me. I don't think that the Midrash is coming from a critical perspective. I don't think it's saying that these people are at fault because they didn't recognize what was going on. It could be that for whatever reason it was hidden from them. Right. We had that story. We had the story of the Shunamit in Malachim Beis. Right. The Shunammite woman who houses Elisha, and she has the son, and then the son gets sick, right? And she goes to the prophet for help, and the prophet says, "Listen, for some reason, God just hid this situation from me. I didn't even know that she was so in trouble, that her son was sick. Right? God hid it from me. Right? Why did God decide to hide it from the prophet? It's not known. Right? And the Rambam says in Moreh Nevuchim, in the second chelak, in like Mem Hey, Perek Mem Hey, somewhere around there, he says that that God intentionally keeps information from the prophets in order to make them take a certain course of action. Because if they knew everything, then they would take a different course of action. It's an interesting idea. And the Gemara in Sukkah tells a mythical story. I say mythical not in the sense that it's not true, but in the sense that it's an agadic overlay on the story in the Tanakh. It says that Shlomo had two trusted servants, and he met the angel of death one day, and the angel of death looked very happy and excited. And he asked the angel, "Why are you so excited?" So he said, because I've been given permission to take your two servants. I've been given permission to kill them. So he immediately sends his two servants to this city called Luz. Okay, and Luz is the place where if you get into the city, then the angel of death doesn't have power over you. That's the story. So he sends his servants to Luz, and right as they're about to enter the city, they die. Yeah. So Shlomo sees the next day. He sees the Malach HaMaves again. He sees the angel of death again, and the angel of death said, I'm glad you helped me out, because I was told I'm only allowed to take the servants at the gates of the city of Luz. That's where I'm able to take them. Yeah, meaning, what's the point of this story? Shlomo represents, and he not just represents. He is this, right? The sum total of human intelligence and wisdom. That's who he was. He was the guy. He was literally the smartest guy. So he saw the situation laid out in front of him. He knew all the tricks. He knew all the secrets. It was like, this is how you solve the problem. This is how you save these people from death. But he didn't realize that literally by his actions, he was just working into the hands of the Malach HaMaves. Yeah. So it's like our actions are dafka playing in to what Hashem wants, as opposed to going against it. So again, I don't think that the Midrash is coming from a critical point of view. I'm just saying that right from the perspective. Yeah, and it says that a person should gain a lesson from this, that even if the person's actions that he's engaging in at the moment don't seem so significant to him, he should understand that there were other people in the past that also thought that their actions weren't so significant, and yet they were. They ended up being very significant. So I think that's the idea.
Can you possibly fit this above into the sequence? We have like these frames of a movie starting with Aleph, and like last time we were this force fighting against some bigger force, a little guy. So can you put it in context?
I think you can put it in context. Let's take a step even further back. Let's take it back to the Daled, because I actually like the Daled. I resonated with the Daled for some reason. I'm not sure why. Maybe it's a past life experience or something. The Daled we talked about last week, in the beginning of last week. The Daled talks about is the idea of the feeling of heaviness and constraint of the material world. The the poverty of the material world, but the constraint is not there in order to crush the person, although it might feel that way sometimes, but rather the constraint is there in order to guide the person to the delet, to the door. Meaning, right, the only way out is through. Right, it's meant to squeeze the person onto the right path so that they can eventually get to the delet. Yeah, so that was the Daled that we talked about, the constraint, which is designed in order to get the person right to the place where they are supposed to be, or to be rather on the path that they're supposed to be. And what did we say that the hay was? Yeah, this is put very well by Rev David over here. Right, the hay exists in this domain of nifradut, of disparity, which is connoted by the Daled. Right, we also talked about how the Daled, right, the four, right, because Daled is four, and it connotes the spreading out to the four corners. Ki davar shi'atzamim koro ve'atahu nivdal. It came out of its source and is now separated from its source. V'hi nivdelet mechomer, and is made distinct. La'ashpia lo ach hashpa'ata nishpeit b'kirbeit makom ve'lo merachok. V'hi koach sheba u'mitztaref el kochot ha'chaim hatachtonim. So it is the force that comes and as mitzdaref comes and unifies with the forces from below. It's like we were talking about with when Daniel was over here. We were talking about how the different forces of the personality, right? The development of the person only it takes place within. It's an internal process, but ultimately all the forces of personality are only applied in relation to other people. So a person wants to be independent. And have their own personality, develop their own self, but ultimately there is no such thing as self without the context of relationship. So that was the idea that the Hay was bringing in. The Hay was bringing in that distinctness and relationship are really two sides of the same coin. That was the theme of the Hay. So again, moving from the Daled, which is the constriction of the reality, which is pointing you towards a certain goal, it's kind of forcing you into that goal because you have no other choice. And then the Hay is realizing that the development of the individual can only be in relationship to everything else. That was what the Hay is representing. So it makes very good sense that we're transitioning into the Vav, which the Vav is the force that all the disparate forces can rally around in order to act in concert. So we do have a progression over here. We have the progression of constriction, which is forcing individuation, the realization that individuation is not a move to disassociate from everything else, but on the contrary, individuation is in order to facilitate connecting back to everything. That's the Hay. And then Vav is the rallying force that all disparate forces can come together and act in a concerted way, in a way that can contain bracha, can contain blessing more than each individual could on their own. Yeah, so we have I think a pretty clear progression from how we're moving. Was that somewhat clear?
Yeah,
all right. That would be hard. Yeah.
It seems like in talking about love, he does not talking about relationship. He's talking about relationship with Hay. But in love, he's not talking about relationship. He's talking about gathering forces together to do something, to build a mishkan.
Right. So there, the relationship is in the context of we all have a common mission.
Right.
That's the relationship.
So, but
like people on a team, they might not all be best friends, but they're all there because they recognize that the team has a goal. So they're all part of the team.
But the Vav is clearly the Zeran Pin, and the Zeran Pin is clearly about relationship. He mentions that, so I don't know how he's playing this.
The Zeran Pin is clearly relationship.
Yes, sir, it's clearly relationship.
So I would make the distinction between relationship in terms of the face-to-face relationship of two individuals, like face-to-face communicating. That's one type of relationship. And then there's the relationship of common goal, common interest.
Right.
Which is more utilitarian.
Right.
Yes?
So I'm jumping to modern.
The Vav is the more utilitarian type of relationship. It's like we're all rallying around the same thing, so therefore we're all together.
Right. So I've jumped to modern psychology, which they say that women operate on a face-to-face level. They sit across from each other, and men want to go bowling together. They get together.
There you go.
But
I heard an amazing thing a few days ago, which mamash dovetails what you're just saying. It's an amazing phenomenon that the average angle in which two women that are talking, the average angle in which they're standing. So the average angle is about like 88 to 90 degrees, like mamash, like parallel face to face. And with men, the average is more like 65, 70, 70 on a good day, right? Like it's like they're not really facing each other totally. Like they're just facing enough so that they can talk. Yeah, it's very interesting. So it is right. Both are a modality of relationship, but one is a face-to-face relationship of interconnectivity of two people or two beings, and one is a relationship of common goal. So Vav is the relationship of common goal, which is why it's a Zer Anpin, which is why it's the masculine energy, right? Which is right. It goes fits very well with what we're probably discussed. Is Hay more feminine? I don't think that the Hay is not embodying the. It's not embodying the Nukva necessarily. Although the final Hay of the Shem Hashem is alluding to the attribute of Malchus. That's true. But Rav Kook actually didn't talk about that when we did Hay too much. I mean, he did a little bit allude to it, but not in the context of that it's the Nukba, that it's the feminine, but rather that it's the It's the spreading out aspect. It's the feminine capacity of being able to hash out potentiality. That was the point that he talked about, but not the feminine in relation to the Zer Anpin. And so it's a slightly different Nakuda.
In the flash of
the last hay in that construct.
The teacher could see the widening of it within.
Right. So yeah. So in this model, the last hay would be the rippling effect, meaning there's a potentiality within the individual. There's a development of the skill within the individual. That's the first hay. The vav is the shooting out, so to speak, where other people can now experience that developed skill, and the hay is the rippling effect of that skill. That what he puts into the world now emanates outward. It's not just the person that he's interacting with, but rather, right, spreads out to more individuals. That's how that works out in that model. In that model is how it works out. Tov, Yishar Koach.